Welcome to Two Minds, One Model, a podcast dedicated to exploring topics in machine learning and artificial intelligence. I'm John Jezel, along with my co-host, John Rocha, and we're here at Sonoma State University's Department of Computer Science. Each episode will be unpacking significant research papers that are shaping the future of AI, breaking down complex topics and exploring what these developments mean for the field and society. You'll also hear interviews with industry professionals, researchers, and students here at SSU, plus special segments on emerging ML and AI topics that catch our attention. What makes our show unique is our thematic approach. Each semester, we'll focus on specific areas of AI research, giving you a comprehensive deep dive rather than scattered topics. This fall, we're dedicating 6 episodes to one of the most crucial challenges in modern AI, interpretability. We'll explore how researchers are working to make AI systems more transparent, explainable, and trustworthy. This is episode 1 of our first season, and to kick things off, today we'll be covering a brief history of AI, setting the stage for us to discuss the interpretability within its current context. Whether you're a student, researcher, practitioner, or simply curious about the future of artificial intelligence, we're glad you've joined us. So let's get started with today's episode.
I suppose that's my cue. So here's a good question. Where would you start if someone asked you to explain whatever the technology you're most comfortable with? How would you start approaching the landscape? Like, would you start with your personal history and how you got intellectually interested in AI or machine learning or 911 systems? Or would you simply start with the body of the subject, intended subject?
I think in this particular case,
Yeah,
let's have a brief conversation about how we got
how we both got interested enough to be sitting here right now. That seems sensible to me. Okay, yeah. I'll start. So about 2017, 2018, I'm just a terminally curious and procrastinating nerd who likes to read stuff and doesn't have much scrutiny as to what intellectually. And so I ventured from field to field as far as like interests, and around 2017 or 2018, the paper came out that OpenAI, well, first I saw the headline. The headline was something along the lines of AI company doesn't want to release product because it's too spooky. You know, I'm editorializing a little bit, obviously, but I basically saw that headline and said, why on earth would a text generation program be of any concern to anyone? Because at this time I was familiar, as we all internet denizens that we are likely familiar with or have some capability to ascertain whether the person you're interacting with is a human or not. This is what's colloquially referred to as the Turing test. Via a text-only conversation, can you accurately predict if this is a human or not? This is a understanding most of us gain on the internet, who like to argue and be on the internet. So I stumble upon the headline and I investigate deeper and I look into the science of it, and I realize there are 2 scientific reasons that concern was being raised, and I would argue legitimately, but again, this is all opinion, keep in mind. We are stating our own opinions and no one else's. So I read the headline, I looked past the headline, and 2 reasons. One, there was no plateau in sight. In any way that they could measure these things, the graph showed a logarithmic improvement as more compute and more data was tossed at it. Many scientific graphs will show plateaus or where the methodology begins to become flawed or hits its limits, I should say, rather than flawed.
Sure.
And so that was indicator 1 to me. Indicator 2 was what the company actually said. They basically didn't even talk about scary or dangerous or whatever like the article purported. It was, hey, companies, hey, social media platforms, this thing will break your bot detection. We know, we've tried, so maybe learn how to detect this type of bot. Mm-hmm. That was the meat that the media turned into AI company won't release model, super scary, big, boisterous, grandiose, self-aggrandizing AI salesman says his product is too good so as to be scary and threatening. I mean, that's, the intonation I read into whoever wrote the headline, admittedly.
Right, sure.
So, yeah, that was the graph's not plateauing in any discernible way. And the actual serious, legitimate concern from the company that was purported to be a self-aggrandizing salesman both made me think, okay, this is not normally what I would see among vacuous salesmen. Is careful, calculated language and risk assessment, and all of that seems, I'll look closer, basically.
Sure.
So I started paying attention to the company in the research space because it was cool, and anyone who enjoys science fiction will probably have a fairly robust understanding of what artificial intelligence or machine learning or deep learning, we might use these terms interchangeably. Functionally, they're synonymous, and when they're not, we'll make it clear. So I just vaguely was more interested in the field, and that grew slowly but steadily until, obviously, ChatGPT was the dam breaker.
Yeah.
And that is obviously when I could start talking about it to other people. And I think that makes a natural segue to John, how he got into it.
So prior to coming here to SSU, I was with Yahoo. And prior to that, I was with a small startup in Illinois. And throughout that time, beginning with the time at the startup, we dabbled a little bit in looking at expert systems, and then Yahoo made fairly strong use of
expert systems. Remember that term for the the little jingle that goes off in educational content.
For sure,
is what I'm imagining.
And at Yahoo, they were using machine learning for a variety of purposes to determine the.
Already? Way back then? This isn't
Yahoo,
a new fad?
Well, we're only talking about 5 years ago or so. We're not talking about ancient history.
And technology. and what technological department is 5 years not
That's fair.
A large window of time?
And to be honest, at the time, I didn't think much about AI itself, other than the kind of nebulous way
because
in which a science fiction reader thinks about AI.
You didn't think about it because it wasn't portrayed like it was in the article that caught my attention initially in my newsfeed as self-aggrandizing tech salesman, vaporware salesman.
Yeah, and by the time I left Yahoo, it was apparent that something was happening with AI. I didn't have a real strong
give us some
drive.
Timeline. Can you tell us approximately when you were
this
leaving Yahoo?
4 years ago now, 3 years ago now.
Cool. Okay.
A little over,
3
years ago now. Yeah. And obviously since then things have kind of exploded. Not kind of, almost literally. and
not almost literally in many cases. As
so
we'll see.
As that time went on, and I decided to come here to SSU, it was out there, but I was still a little bit ambivalent about it. I know it was going to be an important thing. I didn't realize how quickly it was going to be important. So right at the beginning, literally day one of stepping foot on campus, I met some guy named John Rocha. And you asked my opinion on AI and where it was, and you were clearly well ahead of me in terms of your understanding of AI and how it impacted society and where it was technically at the time. So we're talking about just over a year ago, and it got me thinking, okay, maybe this is something I should start thinking a little bit more seriously about. And the more and the deeper I got into my time here and interacting with faculty and interacting with the student body, it became clear that it was huge. And shortly after being here and spending a lot of time discussing AI with you, and everything you said was way over my head, I realized that it was high time that I doubled down on learning what this AI thing was all about.
I am curious, as someone with more professional experience in tech than me, do you remember any discrete demo, or because I imagine as a a person with great technical experience, you've been pitched a lot of systems that are supposed to cure everything or solve everything or make everything better. I imagine that's a common pitch that you've heard as an engineer, or
there are certainly tendencies for people to overhype the capabilities of what their systems can do, and they almost inevitably fall a little bit short as soon as you start pushing their limits. And to be honest with you, AI has been no different. The difference has been the rate at which it's improved and the point at which you have to push it in order to get to the point where things are breaking down and failing. And I think a lot of people, when they run into a problem with AI, they fail to see or understand or comprehend
why.
How amazing it is that it is able to actually do what it is actually currently doing. And the fact that it isn't able to do what an expert, in the area would be able to do is lost.
Less a condemnation.
Yeah, they take that, right. They take that, or they use that as a condemnation to AI's capability. And it's clear that to someone like me, that the fact that it's actually able to
have such malleable,
cause people to think that it should be capable of dealing with things at an expert level, that is actually it's indicative of how far AI has actually come and how powerful these things actually are, that it can replace partially the work that somebody else would normally do, or I would have to go to somebody else or figure something out myself manually.
So it was half it being practically useful to you in your day-to-day operations, and half its presence in the cultural zeitgeist?
The first part, I would say, at that time, it was not so much how useful it is to me. It's how amazing its capability really was. It has been in the past year that it has become more and more and more and more useful to me.
And trust me, we'll get into why that is.
Yeah, partly out of need, partly out of, your...
FOMO.
No, you're browbeating me into using...
I prefer the verbiage of a stalwart proselytizer.
Champion.
Yeah, I proselytize, sir. I'm not a salesman. But yeah, at the end of the day, if someone's talking at you, it's to convince you of something.
Yeah. So in the end, that kind of got me to where I am, and to the point where sometime in the middle of spring semester, in the middle of one of our ridiculous conversations that was going in too many different tangents, I stopped and looked at you and I go, we should do a podcast. And the rest is kind of history.
Yeah, I had already some experience in live production, being part of a radio podcast-ish thing on the internet. What is a podcast? What is anything? It's all ones and zeros.
So for me, this is a completely new experience. And if you haven't figured out, the tone this podcast will take is one of a conversational one. And
so we've talked about our history with AI. Have we covered that sufficiently?
I think so, and I think it's time that we transition into the
get factual,
the core of our episode, and that is basically a history of AI up through
the main.
I think we're going up through the early 2020s, right?
I don't know what in personal experience. Yes. In any meaningful detail, we have yet to begin. But
the intent is for today for us to talk about the history.
Okay. Yeah. Yes. So the main thesis statement is it's like any other technology. If more money is invested to it, more money and people and labor and time and will are exerted in that direction. It's a force like any other. It will be amplified by that swell of resources, whether they be human or capital or compute, which is now an actual bottleneck. We'll get into some fun stories about that later. But the point is, all technology is sort of, calling it one would be too strong. But before these things were called AI, back when they were dumb enough that no one wanted to use them and they didn't have 700 million plus weekly active users, the field of chatting with a computer program was strictly a research term, and it was a research field called natural language processing, NLP. And you might have heard them called that before these things got good enough that they could be sold as, hey, try this thing on your weird idiosyncratic task that you need to do. Yeah, it's probably good enough for you to pay us a little bit of money for it to do it sometimes, and that humble of a pitch is generally enough to be taken seriously among the curious.
Right. Well, and to expand on the concept of natural language processing, this is the technology that was used in things like speech recognition and things like that.
Any handling of language that is produced by us flesh bags naturally,
right?
Whether that be speech transcription or automatic translation,
right,
or sentiment analysis, or one of the first, colloquial first, not literal. There's a reason the first mover was 3.5, not 1.0,
right,
or
right,
0.1.
Right. Yeah,
that wasn't a arbitrary decision.
It took iterations to get to where they are now.
And as we dig deeper, not only did it take, it took since the dawn of technology. Sure. We all stand on the shoulders of giants, right? But the point is that this did not come out of nowhere. It will not go anywhere wholly, just like anything else in life. The point is, this is not a binary discussion. Is AI this? Is AI that? Can machine learning do X or Y? I am simply interested in indulging my curiosity by trying to ascertain the rate of change of technology and how it interacts with society.
Sure.
So let's go back to someone who shared a similar,
You beat me to the segue.
Yeah, I could feel the.
You could feel the
segue coming on. So I want to start with, just to set not too serious of a mood, but because I think we've done enough to
bore our listener.
Well, to disarm to disarm the notion, the more serious value judgments, like most content that speaks about this is pretty dramatic and polarized. Would you say that's a fair assessment of most? I mean, maybe not what we consume
AI,
as practiced.
I think AI in particular is a very polarizing topic. Yeah, especially when you start looking at the way it
manifests.
It may and is displacing the efforts of other people, and we're not going to get into that today, or maybe not even this season. But it is definitely something that I am personally sensitive to, despite being an advocate for the use of AI. Anyway, let's. I
was just going to say he was the one who stopped me from.
I know, right?
From producing an artificial, even as a disclosed cold open. So don't ever let him fool you into thinking he's not a labor advocate at the end of the day. I'm joking, of course, but the point is here that, as John said, machine learning as a more abstract field had been thought about since as long as people have been thinking. Mm-hmm. But the start of history that we'll track is I'm gonna call the start of history when one paper by one person was published. Mm-hmm. So, keep in mind.
So history started in the 50s? Is that what we're saying?
Actually, I'm going to start with a quote from 1863. See if I should have led with the quote and asked you to guess the century.
Oh.
Now see if I was a better dramatist. That would have been a wittier way to... That's how you know this is legitimate, folks. Very poorly produced. Yeah, so this was I guess I can ask it in retrospect, but you'll be biased. So... we find ourselves almost awestruck at the vast development of the mechanical world, at the gigantic strides with which it has advanced in comparison with the slow progress of the animal and vegetable kingdom. We shall find it impossible to refrain from asking ourselves what the end of this mighty movement is to be, and what direction is it tending, what will be its upshot. To give a few important imperfect hints towards a solution of these questions is the object of the present letter. And this is, if you want to look this up, this is a quote by Samuel Butler. He's a very famous person, obviously for me to be reading. But seriously, he's actually famous because he inspired half of a literary genre in its entirety. I know science fiction history goes back further than Dune, but many consider it a seminal work, and Butler and his paper are actually what inspired Frank Herbert's portrayal of technology's conclusion.
Sure.
That it need be rest. It's like atomics. It is something that is too double-edged swordsy, too much risk, and so it had to be removed from society. So already in 1860, there were these ruminations and pondering on, okay, this whole automating thing, so I don't have to do the thing. That part sounds pretty good. The part where when I open my empty wallet, that doesn't feel half as good. How do we reconcile these two positions? So the point is just that since forever, 1860s, let's be real, forever, basically, these have been common thoughts of anyone who ruminates on technology and how it intersects with society. Yeah, I mean, if the core note is what you've already mentioned, the rate of change in the field. He contrasts the animal and vegetable kingdom, i.e. Darwin's slow mechanism for change. Whatever you think of nature versus nurture, we'll leave that for the philosophers podcast, wherever that may be. But the omnipresence of these ideas, time-wise, So contrast that to this quote, and this is someone who's very famous in the field of machine learning, Stuart Russell. Many would argue he's written the seminal textbooks on the matter. He has been in the field long before it was financially prudent for him to do so. That's the, again, caveat emptor. But so he says in his book, sorry, I should cite my source for the first quote. It was a letter published in a New Zealand newspaper. Not exactly Samuel Butler is the guy's name. He wrote a book called E01, E01. If I'm going to include his quote, that feels worthy of shouting out his own individual merits.
Right.
But Stuart Russell, like I said, has written many technical books, as in like textbook for classes type book. He also wrote a book that you don't need a huge technical foundation in to comprehend, but is still about technology.
A more approachable book?
A more approachable book. He also writes more approachable books. And this is from one of those books called Human Compatible, where he ponders how might we coexist with entities with a marked difference in capabilities. And one of the examples he uses in the book that I think illustrates this most finely and succinctly is if someone came up to you and said, I have a machine that would make gorillas have 250 IQ or whatever metric you want to use to measure intelligence, that made them twice as smart as an average human on average, statistics. You got to do what you got to do
right
to make value statements. But the core idea is we like to believe in our biocentrism that we're supremely unique beings and individuals. And look what we did to the last guys, basically, for whatever that's worth as a societal explanation. But anyway, the quote from Stuart Russell, he's giving a non-technical talk, and he says, after explaining what AI was about, I nominated 5 candidates for the biggest event in the future of humanity. 1, we all die. Pandemic, meteor, nukes, etc. 2, we all live forever. Medical solution to aging. 3, we invent faster than light travel and conquer the universe. 4, we are visited by a superior alien civilization. 5, we invent superintelligent AI. I suggested that the 5th candidate, superintelligent AI, would be the winner because it would help us avoid physical catastrophes, it would help us achieve eternal life and faster than light travel if those were indeed possible, and not simply the machinations of sci-fi authors. That part was mine, not Stuart Russell's. Back to Stuart Russell. Yeah. It would represent a huge leap, a discontinuity in our civilization. Arrival of superintelligent AI is in many ways analogous to the arrival of a superintelligent alien civilization, but much more likely to occur. And perhaps most importantly, AI, unlike aliens, is something over which we have some say, that being one of the key sticking points. Then I, being Stuart Russell, then I asked the audience to imagine what would happen if we received notice from a superior alien civilization that they would arrive in 50 years. Just seriously consider the ramifications of an event like that.
Which is interesting because 50 years, if you were in almost any other context, is an eternity. In terms of our lives.
One of the top 5 things in the future of humanity scale events for one to be that close. So Russell continues, the word pandemonium does not even begin to describe it. It being what would happen if we received that letter from an alien civilization, a superior, clearly evident by their method of communication, I presume. And he laments yet our response to the anticipated arrival of superintelligent AI has been, underwhelming begins to describe it. Yeah, that's academic for is bad, is real bad out there, guys.
Yeah, it's interesting because obviously I think the general population would not have been able to look forward in time and see how quickly AI has developed in this particular time frame, which if you contrast that to what he's talking about, the 50-year time frame of an alien civilization is going to come visit us, and it causes people to panic. What would their response be if you were to say within a decade, we could have this super powerful AI?
When would you, the listener, get scared? At what time scale would you concern yourself? Just seriously, like individually, you, John, I've never actually asked you this question. What timeline would it take you, presuming you could verify the authenticity, of course? I mean, that's, and not that it's a prank call, but,
sure, yeah.
What
are we talking about aliens visiting or AI?
They're functionally synonymous in this metaphor.
I don't.
I mean, the point is.
Okay, yeah,
the
sure.
Point is,
what kind of a time frame would
scare?
Panic? But honestly, I know. I think there is a. I think there is a difference. I think there is a difference because the aliens is an absolute event, and there is a lot more.
Yeah,
we can relate to the notion of there being this alien creature, this alien, this alien individual that has a will and has
a question,
a self-determination. Whereas it is a lot harder for your average person to think about artificial intelligence and ascribe to it.
A chatbot ascribe to a chatbot the machinations of some.
And when it comes to aliens, I would put that. I would certainly start panicking within 10 to 20 years. Whether I would panic at 50 years, I don't know. That gives us time to do a lot.
Fascinating
but
question.
When it comes to AI, I would shorten that to 5 to 10 years. Also, bear in mind that I have less concern about. That's not to say no concern. I have less concern about AI being antagonistic than I do about.
Oh, don't worry. I'll
we'll get there. Than I do an alien civilization. I am assuming aliens that interact with us, there's a high percentage of there being a conflict, whether it's from their side or our side. So it's difficult to make a comparison.
Theory,
so yeah. So anyway, so moving on. Let's continue down our history.
The point with this Russell quote that I wanted to illustrate was that assuming even that we can discard the dramatic and catastrophic events from the spectrum of possible futures and that we're going to get mundane implementation and adoption like every other technology in history, it's just going to become more proliferated over not every other, obviously, but you get what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
Cell phones, internet, whatever. There are some countries where more people have access to an internet-connected cell phone than running water.
Right.
So some technology rapidly outpaces others in adoption, even one that the Romans had figured out, like running water. The point of that quote was to illustrate that even if these things are not going to do anything catastrophic or scary, and even if we can't ascribe human intent, which... spoiler alert for later episodes, we can, kind of. Basically, that there are still concerns even if these things aren't going to... The eyes aren't going to turn red. There are still things to be concerned about, even though we can acknowledge that that's just a funny fictional plot device and not a likely event that's going to happen. So that is the reason we are focusing first on interpretability, which is one of the mechanisms we use to explore the safety of these things. Because, like I said, Stuart Russell is taken very seriously. The fact that he and more popularly, you might have seen if you watch any news at all, which, you might have seen Geoffrey Hinton. He's actually the second most cited researcher in the field. He commonly is on TV now lamenting the dangers. The point is, we need to not panic at the letter from the aliens, using the metaphor again. We need to have good tools to understand the entity we are creating, whatever you want to call it. Let's, get less abstract and more material. Basically, this whole thing started when a few researchers were like, hey, anything that humans can do, we can probably describe to others and to a machine coherently enough to constitute an intelligent system worth selling to people. And this was in, somewhere late 50s, early 60s. But look up Claude Shannon summer AI experiment. So basically, the endeavor to create systems that are intelligent, perhaps even more so than us, or to, at the very least, teach abstraction. I think their stated goal was something more like to teach abstraction and basically natural language processing. But however you would know better than this, however they described it back when you needed punch cards to program a computer.
I was a little before my time.
So,
by the way, you were referring to the Dartmouth Summer Research Project. That was 1956.
Okay, so late 50s was stretching it, but like I said,
it's after 55. We'll call it late 60. We'll give it to you.
So
that's a freebie.
So that was what the few books I've read on the subject consider the birth of focused desire to manufacture intelligence itself. Mm-hmm. Like the notion of learning and abstraction, like the stated directive of that was punch card programming. If you know anything about programming, you'll know why I'm saying that like it's a scary thing. The point is, when technology was where it was at then, they had these are very famous researchers talking to Claude Shannon, the guy famous for teaching us that zeros and ones
so with that level of technology things. You're saying that they felt that capability existed to actually accomplish this.
So my point is that researchers are being as carefully mm-hmm. are dancing so carefully around the subject.
Given that experience, sure.
Should cause us great concern. Great concern is a little dramatic. Should be of note. So now we're going to skip a little forward to describe a way. We've already done a lot of the legwork of this podcast, which was disavowing the binary value judgments that many make about a field of intellectual endeavor. Science, a field of science. How many other fields of science do you hear people write off? Pretty much every day, every week, I've seen a AI going bust, AI ending, mm-hmm. bubble bursting. Whatever.
Certainly not as high profile as AI is.
So the point is that's a very common occurrence, and we're going to call the periods of ebb and flow. I mean,
sure.
Everyone ebb and flow, winter and summer.
Yeah,
these are just characterizations of positive, negative momentum. They're measures of a relationship between time and. Anyway, the point is,
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no.
I was going to say we had a brief conversation earlier about the definition of winter and summer and what they're actually referring to. Winter and summer don't refer to the winter is not the cessation of the research or the work being done on AI, but rather
it's an ebb. It's a flow.
It's actually more of a public use or utilization within a commercial application, whereas summers show them becoming more prominent. As the weaknesses are apparent, it pulls back into less prominent within the market. And at no point does research cease.
Yeah, the point is this is not a binary. This is not a small endeavor. This is not an endeavor made upon the wish of a star or the word of Elizabeth Holmes. Can I legally say her name? She's convicted, right? I can legally. Anyway, the point is that it wasn't vacuous vaporware.
Right.
This is an entire field of this is many fields of science, as we'll see later. But for the sake of an introduction in history, we're treating it as one scientific endeavor. So let's fast forward from. I don't know. Do we even need to explain what the summers and winters were?
Well, let's look at this in a more general sense.
So the first efforts were by Claude Shannon and Minsky and I forget the third guy's name. Their ambition marks year zero, on the calendar of certain
when they felt that this summer project was going to usher in artificial general intelligence.
That was the start of a summer, of a boom, and as we just discussed, that just means more people taking it more seriously. Very granular measure, but we're going to use binary terms like summer and winter because they're helpful mechanisms.
Right. And they conjure a feeling. So okay,
it embeds a lot of meaning. More parlance of the profession. But anyway, so let's fast forward. Basically, there were multiple booms and busts, as we might call them today, in the field. From the first time a computer program beat the programmer in checkers, and we're talking that was a headline that invoked fear and awe. And we look at that today and laugh at the notion that a checker playing computer program was any type of concern. It's comical. So it is. The point is, it is fair to ask yourself why is there any need for concern? Why?
Well, let's continue down into the what those winters and summers were. You're saying that first summer was.
I'm saying that
was brought upon us by.
I'm saying that something as vast as a summer can be precipitated by something as small as one study or one paper or one program,
right,
or one product or one leap. All it is a change in a notable change in the pace of things.
Sure. And you're saying there are 4 basic full cycles of winter summer that we've been through, and that first one was ushered in by
the students Minsky and I'm so sorry, the other guy, I should know your name. First off, Claude Shannon was already very famous as a researcher, among people again whom researchers can be described as famous. Which is already a fairly so. The point is that it wasn't even to get into the details of each of the booms and busts. The point was just to illustrate that these things are not binary, that we might say things like winter or boom or bust or use more dramatic language, but understand that like any other scientific endeavor, there are eureka moments.
Well, so let's go through them without too much editorializing about the values of each one. What event ushered in each summer, and what then kicked us back into a winter?
Spoiler alert for all of them. What kicked us into a winter was the salesman promises didn't hold up. That at the end of the day, that's what. They overpromised and underdelivered.
Yeah.
Which is, as anyone in software,
the opposite of what you're supposed to be doing.
Exactly. So what I'm trying to do is abstract away from the notion that these summers and winters are different in any way. They are always precipitated by a dramatic change in the belief that these things are useful.
Right.
And so, so now let's get a little more discreet and modern.
And as we said, so what ushered in each one of the summers?
You actually,
that's what
my goal. My goal with that theme was to abstract away from that notion completely. That was it's just a rhetorical device to get there.
I feel like it's useful
the first one was a study.
Yeah, the first one was the
Claude Shannon study that we've
talked
about.
That led to this summer project. Or that was associated with the summer project?
That led to the hubris of great minds to put to paper. We think, I'm paraphrasing again, obviously, we think great progress can be made on these things in one summer if the right scientists put their minds to it.
And so if essentially they basically hit a wall and were not able to accomplish what they set out to do anywhere near.
Yeah, their eyes.
Nowhere.
Their eyes were bigger than their stomach.
By orders of magnitude. And that kind of precipitated into a into a new winter.
Once everyone starts playing with these things that these guys say are so cool, and they, like you, run into the walls.
Yeah.
And then most people will hit the wall and go, oh, okay, this thing is useless, whatever. Thus, the winters arrive. When public perception dips so far that no amount of pragmatic evidence that this thing will improve your daily life will be useful.
And so let's move on to the next summer. That was precipitated by
the expert systems, which was basically like a way of formalizing logic and math, such that we started to forget it was math, basically.
Right.
I mean, that's what all. I'm no mathematician, but in my experience, everything comes down to math at the end of the day, and like this was no different. But the point is, every winter, this salesman getting too bold in their promises was what precipitated every winter. So for the example, the second one, which is expert systems, the promise was give it a narrow domain and it will be as good as an expert.
Yeah, right.
It will be an expert system.
Yeah.
And when everyone tried them and said, hey, boo, this thing sucks, boo, then the winter comes. So the second one was expert systems. The third one was basically when chess was conquered.
So when Deep Blue was able to beat
Kasparov, famously,
at chess, right, and that made
96
national headlines. That was way
Kasparov.
more. Yes, sorry, you're
Kasparov
correct.
Was a household,
but yes, and that was very memorable, and that made artificial intelligence a household name, or at least it brought it into the current zeitgeist.
A summer, one might call it.
Yeah.
But you get what we're saying here. So we've kind of covered a few of the, when a game is, it can be as small as, like I said in the previous example, we move just from chess to checkers. Like a pattern matching.
Checkers, you mean checkers to chess?
Checkers to chess, right?
It's an order of magnitude of complexity greater.
But the point is, a careful observer might say, why are we taking their ability to perform a discrete task as indication of their capability to perform general tasks? And that is sort of the key question, and like where serious debate on the subject begins.
Right.
Is like, how general are they really?
So what was the technology that came about that caused Deep Blue to be able to defeat a master?
It's been a long time since I read anything about that subject. The first thing my memory goes to is a good search algorithm for a large problem space relative to the computation available at the time. Like I said,
so it was able to more parallelize the
more
computation. Right, I see. Okay.
So,
so massive parallel processing was able to be used to...
In general, an even more abstract way to think about it was as compute increased, as the number of operations that machines everywhere could do increased as a byproduct of Moore's Law and other things, but we'll leave it as Moore's Law for now. You can look it up if you want. As that alone is sufficient fissile material for the ebb and flows we call winters and summers, booms and busts. Okay. So, but yes, you're right that it takes a very skilled hand to turn that raw resource into materially useful products or systems.
Yeah, but as we saw,
expert systems, chess, all of these make the people with the money, the people, make them believe that it's possible, that we're close for real this time.
But in that particular case, it was a very narrow domain, and it used fairly straightforward logic, but massively parallel.
Yeah,
and there was not a lot of novelty behind it. Is that accurate to say? I don't know.
After the first time it beat you're 100% that the novelty wears off quick.
Mm-hmm.
After the first time it beats a world champion at chess, who cares? Whoever talks about the second time?
Right.
know?
Yeah, and it quickly came to the point where people were going, okay, that's all well and good, but what else can it do? And can it actually solve these bigger, broader questions? And it couldn't.
And every winter that happened, that was the essential conclusion that consumers, that the general public arrived at. Okay. Not worth my time.
Yeah. So then we move on to back into a winter.
And this is where, back when expert systems failed, is back when the fields got much more serious and much more mathematical.
So there's a lot more deep research going on.
Exactly.
And they were.
They said, all right, we've been burned. We've burned our own credibility. Like, we've staked our own reputations. Maybe bring in some mathematicians to tell us our odds instead of thinking, hey, we know it all. We're computer guys.
So they went into the next winter understanding that
we're going to need to be more.
We're going to need
more math guys.
And before we push our agenda on the world, or present,
try to sell.
Try make broad.
Before we try to make a summer happen.
Yeah, but before we try to make grand claims about AI, we better be darn sure that those claims are going to hold water. Exactly. So that brings us to basically.
So this is when things got particularly interesting. So first off, video games and the development of GPUs are one of the key. Like, talk about serendipity. If like gamers didn't necessitate and demand and want better graphics, the infrastructure for parallelized compute, the infrastructure, the desire, the idea, the research, none of it exists without. I mean, not none of it.
There were still supercomputers and those sort of things, right?
But they were used for like doing calculations for weapons and serious big boy stuff. Not playing a video game, not playing Pong.
They had some broader, they had use in research and whatnot. But yes, they were giant systems that were being used by a very narrow segment of the population, and they cost a whole lot of money. So now you're bringing in these GPUs that are relatively affordable, massively parallel, just on a desktop, literally. You've got what used to be massive parallel processing that can now fit on a desktop.
I mean, the most common way to illustrate this is the phrase, I'm pretty sure all of us with a cell phone, all of us who grew up with cell phones learned.
Sure.
Your phone has more compute than the computer that got us to the moon.
Right.
I mean, we staked human lives on calculations made based on what we know to be kind of risky.
A comparison I've always felt was impertinent, but it definitely contrasts
boldly to the way they comport themselves now, hasn't it? I mean, meaning AI salesmen, or in general the progenitors and proselytizers, whoever makes this stuff. And
so the advent of the GPU, and along with
that was meant to illustrate the serendipity that also is involved in these things. So fast forward from chess to the computer guys by this point in 96 are smart enough to say, hey man, no, we're not claiming this is going to do anything more than X. They basically got burned enough to know not to put their hand on the stove. That's the most colloquial way I can put it. So 2012, the reason these we're taking so long to get through a couple events is because these are core events and themes and ideas that will, we're building a common foundation a tree of knowledge that we can branch from. So in 2012, there was this paper called AlexNet, and before that, ImageNet, which was a training data set.
Right.
If you want this whole story, shout out to the great Fei Li, her work, and more digestible, her book, The Worlds I See, is a beautiful insight both into her personal journey and the intellectual journey that this technological history takes. But the point is that a great deal of luck is required at all times, too. So the point is that this researcher happened to have the right idea that let the researchers who put the AlexNet paper out, basically, she staked her career on, hold on, guys, instead of just banging our head against this algorithm and trying to bang out a couple more compute cycles, maybe we should start thinking about this differently. Maybe we should think about enriching our data sets that we're training these things on. I mean, now that seems self-evident.
Right.
But she was the pioneer, the trailblazer of that school of thought.
Right.
Because back in that day, what PhD student is going to, what person is going to stake their economic worth to building a bigger data set? I mean, she hand-labeled, well, she and her undergrads, but, that's a different story. She and her undergrads and postgrads, right, not even undergrads,
right,
did the labeling for her. But they labeled millions of images. That's ImageNet. They labeled and classified millions of, a million, which, think about that for a second. Imagine taking a million images off the internet and writing descriptions for them and then putting out a research paper on it.
Yep.
I mean... the fact that it got done at all.
The scale is mind-boggling.
Yeah. So AlexNet is the more important piece of this puzzle. I just had to shout out Fei Li because she was the trailblazer. Okay. But AlexNet was equally trailblazing in bringing back, and here's the main point of what will of all subsequent discussion. They brought a little-known data structure out from the discard pile called neural networks, and this data structure. We won't get into it too deep now. That'll probably come when we talk about another seminal paper. So in 2012, basically a couple of researchers said, hey, there's enough compute now in these GPUs that we can start doing some fancy stuff. We can toss 1 million images at this program and have it retain some dimensionality, some way to reliably classify new images it hadn't seen before. That's what we call generality. When the system begins to be able to do things that are outside of its purported scope. In 2012, we learned that bigger and better data sets were important, and we learned that the neural network data structure wasn't a dead end. Actually, it was a great path to take just too early. It was before its time. It was a data structure that was invented before compute was sufficiently cheap to explore it, basically. And that's the core of the matter, right. Is that when compute got sufficient, people could toss a $400 GPU was sufficient in compute to handle these problems. So let's move forward again to the next seminal work that if you're listening, you've probably heard of. And if you haven't, you probably won't be listening. This paper was called Attention is All You Need by researchers at Google and Google's labs. And this paper, which actually even by them, they didn't realize what they had unearthed. But it is funny now in retrospect, looking at it from a commercial sense, that Google had the keys to the kingdom and they gave it away for free, as it were, by making it open science. That's another discussion. So attention is all you need. What was the advent of a new data structure to better handle sequential data? And that's kind of the key value prop for transformers. And so are you starting to see the dance that's happening here between availability of compute and compute costs and how liberally ideas are explored, and by how willing researchers are to take bold bets? And by bold, I mean budget-wise, and
right.
time-wise,
right.
And compute-wise. So the dance is between those who produce machines that can do more compute more better, to be colloquial, and those who want to use the computer to do a specific thing. Those are the two groups that have to play together well for things like transformers, for things like AlexNet, ImageNet, whatever. So now let's retread some ground here that's going to sound awfully familiar, and you're going to you're now hopefully going to be able to characterize why this event wasn't talked about the same way Garry Kasparov getting beat was, even though technologically it's a much more impressive marvel what I'm about to talk about than Deep Blue was. Because, and this is getting into the weeds a little bit. I don't know how much you want to get into the weeds.
Well, we don't have enough time to get into very deep in the weeds. We kind of have to
there's this
along.
The point is there's this another order of magnitude jump in game complexity, and in fact it's a lot of orders of magnitude. It's not just one. But the point is a more complex game was conquered. This event
is the Go.
Right? Exactly. Yeah. There's a Chinese board game that makes chess look like checkers and makes checkers look like whatever.
The order of magnitude more complex.
But it's
or potential
many. It's more closer to an order of magnitudes. So like that's the level of.
All right.
Anyway, so there's two key events related to AlphaGo that we need to touch on briefly. There's AlphaGo, which was the first time that a bootstrapped system in a problem space that was so vast, brute force, even with infinite compute. Not infinite.
Yeah. All available compute.
Exactly. Doing nothing but this searching this problem space for all of time. We can't brute force the problem, and that's getting into P and versus.
Yeah,
P
that's
and,
no.
Right.
No,
so
nope.
Right. Yeah. No. Exactly. So the point is, as the problem spaces get larger, the potential solution space, that is the number of answers to the problem, also increase. And to navigate those spaces intelligently, to search for paths forward in a way that's better than brute force, that is the magic that neural nets provide us. And that things like AlexNet and things like transformers and things like AlphaGo and later AlphaZero, which is basically just V 2.0. I mean, well, really, it's more complex than that, but what isn't?
Sure.
Basically, they, instead of bootstrapping it with expert data, they taught it how to just play against itself, and basically said, hey, whichever one of you wins, that's the better data. Think on that, as we might tell a student. Think on that for a while. And this is what we'll see later is called backpropagation, a term I know John will be familiar with.
Sure.
But hopefully some of you might not be, even if you're interested enough to be listening. So we move from image handling and classification to good, some journalists might even say dangerous, to give a shout out to the start of the show. It's been so long already that we got so confident in these things as to the self-play and bootstrap solution to a problem with a giant problem space and solution space that we can't solve by brute force. That was the that was the subtext of why AlphaGo was made into a documentary, despite the burned hands from the stove that any researcher still in machine learning and deep learning, because
of the sheer the sheer magnitude of the problem from a brute force standpoint.
The fact that they conquered in fact, many machine learning and deep learning experts didn't even, like, when they were asked, when do you think machine learning will conquer Go? Many of them said never, 100 years.
Yeah.
This was we're talking a year before they did it, before they won. And this was when everyone started to say, okay, all right, hold on now. This is 2016 when AlphaGo happens. When it comes out of the lab and beats a professional on the world stage. And gets documentary made. that takes us to, and just keep in mind, bootstrapped learning versus reinforcement learning.
So you
those
had
will be important.
So
later.
there are the two aspects: the magnitude and the fact that it is bootstrap learning. It is not learning from
AlphaZero was the first no human data. Straight up self-play.
It was not trained on data on existing games.
It was given.
It taught itself to play.
And
basically.
Pay attention here, because this is important. This is why safety researchers are concerned, is not because they ascribe human intent to these things, whatever you want to call them, chatbots, AI, AGI, whatever.
Sure, yeah,
it's all the same thing.
Yeah,
a computer program smart enough to make a podcast about.
Right.
Right. So let's just go to GPT and OpenAI. They get basically now we're seeing articles like Larry, Google CEO, or insert tech company here spending insert large amount of money here,
right,
on startup. A little known startup called OpenAI. Can you imagine back when that was, how it was? Where people were willing to bet billions of dollars and just give it to researchers. Just to give you a perspective, the guy who ousted, I don't know, were you paying close enough attention back when Sam Altman was ousted from OpenAI?
Nope.
Okay, we'll touch on that later then. Right. So GPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer.
Right.
Pre-trained meaning, again, we had to give it human data to bootstrap it. Mm-hmm. What I colloquially refer to as bootstrap learning is actually just called supervised learning.
Right.
But, natural language.
Okay,
you can see why it's hard. GPT, like I said, and this is where it comes full circle. There's a reason the first mover was called 3.5, because this this data structure, transformers, had been showing insanely good results in the labs for so long that even the most conservative of salesmen couldn't hold the secret any longer.
Right.
They had to make documentaries about it. They had to sell it to the public. Mm-hmm. They had to let the public access it. So GPT 1, 2, and 3 were basically, hey, what if we toss a bunch more money and compute at this thing? And like I said at the beginning of the show, those graphs that were the answer to what happens if we toss more compute and data at the thing is the research question. And the result that piqued my interest was the fact that the graphs didn't show any sign of deceleration. In fact, all it showed was more and more evidence that the more resources, the faster these things are going to get better. And that's the story of GPT being released. Honestly, the only thing you really need to take away from it is there's a reason the first mover was called 3.5.
Right, because iteratively there was nothing particularly impressive that was going on from, at least to the general public, until you hit 3.5, where people were starting to be able to write their term papers using GPT and ask it questions that it can actually formulate useful answers to.
And you paid a lot of attention to what precipitated the hinge points, the moments where the difference between the public and professionals' expert opinion predictions for the future, however you want to say it, differ so greatly that there's a sea change we can call a winter or a summer. Moments happen, and one happened with chess, with checkers, with Go, and now with transformers, mm-hmm. and more generally anything you can ask it to do, pretty much.
Yeah.
We'll get into why benchmarking is hard and more on that later. But so the key takeaway is that, it's to get to the modern age was an arduous, laborious, continuous, most importantly, adjective-wise,
right,
was a collective endeavor.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So that's I guess is succinctly as I can put it.
So that basically gets us to effectively where we
most
are.
Of present
yeah,
day.
Most
that
of
gets
the
most
present
of
day.
The way.
Obviously, there have been the past few years. There have been some rather significant improvements and increases in the capability of.
In fact,
of
the new question
GPT
researchers ask
other large language models.
In fact, the new question researchers ask themselves is not how will we solve this task with a deeply taught, a deep learning neural net.
Yeah.
If we just make the neural net bigger and more layers and toss more compute and more good data at it, it keeps seeming to get better. Researchers see that, and they don't even think anymore, how can we... They think how long until our benchmark is supplanted. They have to think now, how do we even create a benchmark for these things? And I think that is such a poignant illustration of where we are and why interpretability and understanding why these things do what they do.
Well, and that's actually a great segue. So now that we know where we are basically today in terms of the history of AI, the focus of this season is to discuss interpretability. Interpretability is the study of understanding how it is that these models do what they do. With a normal program, something that is more classically developed, we understand the algorithms, we understand the way the logic flows. We know what's going on inside of the application because we told it, we programmed it that way. It is doing very specifically what we told it to. Now, granted, all computers are doing what you're telling it to. It's just we have abstracted it so far with these models that we don't understand internally what it's actually doing. And even when we ask it to tell it what we're doing, it's not necessarily being accurate, or one might say not being honest about what is going on inside.
And there we go, ascribing human emotion and intent almost automatically. Interpretability is, the researchers were it's like biology. It's biology for a complex thing that we built with a 1960s understanding of what we think the brain does, maybe?
Right. And we still don't understand how the brain works.
The hard problem of consciousness. Shout out David Chalmers. Look up his talk on whether a computer program could be conscious.
Right.
That's a fun philosophical, more than technical discussion. But hopefully we've illustrated at the very least why not to take anyone too seriously who is making any claims to know the future, particularly well. And why these things, this technology and research field is interesting enough to people to talk about and people to listen about.
Well, and that's why we've chosen that as an arc for this particular semester. So
trust me, I pitched them a lot of arcs.
For the next 6 episodes, we are going to get into a lot of the research that was done and a lot of the papers that were written over the past few years, and understanding better
what tools. What's the equivalent of a microscope for a large language model?
Exactly, and we'll build that up to looking at some pretty serious papers toward the end of the season.
And I'll leave you with the CEO of the company that paid the people who produced the paper that we're trying to build up to an understanding to. Dario Amodei, CEO of Anthropic, by the way, a fork of OpenAI. I don't know how many of you knew that, but the second biggest AI lab is an offshoot of the first. And remind me to get into Ilya Sutskever in a later episode, because he's the first or second or third, I forget the order of the 3, but I know the 3 most cited researchers in the field in all of machine learning.
Right.
So this is a quote from Amodei, who is the Sam Altman of, that might be casting aspersions depending on who's listening. It was a different route, a safety lab. He said in a blog post we'll link, I think and talk a lot about the risks of powerful AI. The company I'm the CEO of, Anthropic, does a lot of research on how to reduce these risks. Because of this, people somehow draw the conclusion that I'm a pessimist or doomer who thinks AI will be mostly bad or dangerous. I don't think that at all. In fact, one of my main reasons for focusing on risks is that they're the only thing standing between us and what I see as a fundamentally positive future. I think that most people are underestimating just how radical the upside of AI could be, just as I think most people are underestimating how bad the risks could be. That quote, I think, perfectly encapsulated why I want to look into the how and why, which is what interpretability fundamentally does. Like I said, it's biology for a system we've created that we don't understand, but can do things impressive enough that we're willing to spend billions to try to understand how it's doing that thing we told it to do, and are now mystified. How often in history can you think of, John, where someone's produced a technology that does things that perplex the creators of it? How often does that happen?
Yeah.
Not often. So hopefully we've given a decent basis to start off a more technical discussion on, and it wasn't too unstructured or casual to be abrasive listening.
Sure thing. I think that kind of wraps up what our goal is for this episode. It brings us up to effectively current day, so we can actually start digging into interpretability.
To the first mover. 3.5, GPT 3.5.
Absolutely. So thank you all for joining us. This has been the premiere episode of Two Minds, One Model. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any episodes in our fall series on interpretability. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next time.